The great station of Korath floated silently above a red dwarf star, its outer hull glittering like a jewel in the endless dark. It was not the largest spaceport in the galaxy, nor the most advanced, but it was one of the busiest. Hundreds of different species passed through its shining gates every single day. Merchants bargained, scholars traded data, soldiers rested, and explorers dreamed of distant worlds. Humans were a small minority here. Compared to many other species, they were new to the galactic stage. Some races, like the Valorians, had built empires thousands of years before humans even left their oceans. To the Valorians, humans seemed fragile, slow, and too emotional. And yet, humans were valued. They worked in engineering, trade, and navigation. They had a strange skill for solving problems that confused even the cleverest aliens. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, and not the most brilliant, but they were adaptable. It was this adaptability that had earned them a place aboard Korath Station. In one of the lower engineering bays, a small group of humans worked quietly. Pipes hissed with recycled air, lights blinked on the control boards, and the low hum of reactors filled the background. Among the humans was Elena Carter, a technician with sharp eyes and steady hands. Elena was not a soldier or a politician. She was simply someone who loved machines. She could look at a tangle of broken circuits and see the path to fixing them. But she also carried something with her everywhere she went, a small worn photograph of her brother. The photo showed a smiling young man, standing beside Elena on Earth's coastline. It was the last picture taken before he left for a dangerous mission years ago, a mission he never returned from. For Elena, that picture was more than paper. It was memory, love, and family. Most species aboard Korath did not understand human keepsakes. The Valorians, especially, could not imagine why a flat image could mean so much. To them, emotions, tied to objects, were foolish and primitive, and it was a Valorian noble who made the mistake. The noble's name was Serac Valor, a tall figure with silver-blue skin and a voice that dripped with arrogance. He had never liked humans. To him, they were beneath his notice, little more than animals that had stumbled into the stars. That day, Serac came to the engineering bay with 2 attendants. He wanted a new docking lane for his personal cruiser, and he wanted it immediately. Elena explained politely that the schedule was full and that safety checks were in progress. Serac's eyes narrowed. "Do you think your kind can refuse me?" he asked in a cold, smooth tone. "I am Valorian. I command fleets. Your kind digs through wires like rats." Elena kept her calm. She had worked with difficult aliens before. But Serac noticed the photograph lying on her workbench. He reached down, picked it up, and turned it over in his long fingers. "A crude little image," he said with a mocking smile. "Is this what your kind treasures? Paper and ink? Laughable." Elena reached forward quickly. "Please," she said, "give that back. It's important to me." But Serac only laughed. He crushed the photo in his hand and let the torn pieces fall to the floor. The sound of ripping paper was small, but in that moment, it was louder to Elena than the hum of the entire station. She froze. The other humans in the bay looked up from their work, silent and still. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Elena bent slowly, gathered the torn pieces of the photograph in her hands, and held them as if they were treasure. She did not shout. She did not cry. She only looked up at Serac, her expression calm, but her eyes sharper than blades. "You should not have done that," she said softly. Serac smirked and swept out of the room with his attendants, believing he had won the encounter. To him, humans were too weak to respond, but Serac did not understand humans. News of the incident spread quickly. On Korath Station, rumors traveled faster than data packets. Within hours, every human aboard the station had heard what happened. To the Valorians, it was nothing. They had insulted a human and destroyed a piece of trash. To the humans, it was different. They knew what that photograph meant to Elena. And more importantly, they knew what it meant when someone crossed a line. Other alien races noticed the change. Humans usually laughed and joked while they worked. They were warm and friendly, even with strangers. But now, something was different. They moved with quiet focus. Their conversations grew shorter. Their smiles disappeared. Whispers spread in the station's markets and corridors. The humans are angry. Some species, like the Tarask and the Moradin, shivered at the words. They had seen this before, in other places, in other times. Humans did not express their anger with quick violence. Their anger turned into something colder, something more patient. The humans of Korath did not raise their voices. They did not make threats. They simply returned to work, silently, carefully, with a focus that unsettled everyone who watched. That night, Elena sat in her quarters, carefully pressing the torn pieces of her photo together. The image was broken, but the face of her brother still showed through. She touched it gently, and for the first time in years, she whispered aloud to the picture. "They don't understand, do they? They don't understand what this means to me. But they will. Oh yes, they will." Outside her window, Korath Station turned slowly in the light of the red dwarf star, and somewhere in the corridors, a quiet truth settled into the hearts of every species that had lived long enough to see it. It was dangerous to anger a human. The next cycle on Korath Station began like any other. Lights brightened in the main concourses, merchants opened their stalls, and ships docked or departed in a steady flow. To the casual eye, nothing seemed different. But for those who paid attention, there was a change in the air, a subtle weight pressing on the daily rhythm of life. That weight came from the humans. They still walked the corridors. They still wore their simple work uniforms and carried their tools. But something about them was different now. The humans no longer filled the engineering bays with chatter and laughter. They no longer greeted strangers with easy smiles. Instead, they worked with quiet purpose, their movement steady, controlled, and almost too calm. For some species, it was unsettling. For others, it was terrifying. Whispers in the market, in the station's lower markets, traders noticed it first. A Moradin merchant, whose insect-like eyes caught every detail, leaned close to his companion. "The humans do not laugh today," he whispered. His companion, a Tarask with scaled skin, nodded slowly. "That is because they are angry." The Moradin tilted his head. "Anger? They show no signs of it." The Tarask let out a low hiss. "That is how it begins. I have fought beside humans before. Their anger is not like ours. It is not loud. It is quiet. It waits, and then it strikes." Around them, other aliens overheard. Rumors spread quickly across the markets, then into the docking bays, and finally into the upper command levels. The phrase was repeated everywhere. "The humans are angry." The Valorians dismiss it in the Valorian embassy. Serac Valer sat comfortably in his private chamber, sipping a drink of glowing blue liquid. He had heard the rumors too, but to him, they were amusing. Angry? Over a piece of paper? He laughed, waving his long fingers in dismissal. "How childish these humans are. Let them sulk. It means nothing." One of his attendants shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, noble Serac, other species seem unsettled. They say it is unwise to stir human emotion." Serac's silver-blue eyes narrowed. "Superstitions. The galaxy is filled with species that fear shadows. I will not be moved by tales. Humans are weak. Their machines fail without our guidance. Their bodies break easily. Their anger is nothing to us." But even as he spoke, Serac noticed the way his attendant's crest lowered, the way the others in the room avoided his gaze. The words did not convince them. They had seen the humans in the corridors, and they sensed what Serac could not. Something had shifted. Silent engineering. Meanwhile, in the engineering sectors, the change became more obvious. Normally, when something broke on Korath Station, a group of humans would rush in with tools, cracking jokes as they worked. They were quick, cheerful, and inventive. Now the humans still fixed everything, but they did it differently. They moved in silence, communicating with brief nods or short phrases. When a pipe burst, they repaired it with perfect efficiency. but no laughter followed. When a console sparked, they shut it down and rebuilt it. But their faces were unreadable, focused like stone. The alien engineers who worked beside them began to grow uneasy. Machines that had resisted repair for months were suddenly fixed in hours. Entire networks of wiring were rerouted with astonishing precision. It was as if the humans had unlocked a new level of focus, one fueled by something invisible. Elena. Carter was at the heart of it. She spoke little, but every human followed her lead. When she walked through the engineering bay, tools clicked louder, sparks flashed brighter, and the air seemed to hum with energy. One alien technician finally asked her carefully, "Why do you humans work so hard now? Did something change?" Elena looked at him, her eyes calm but unyielding. "We were reminded of something important," she said simply. Then she returned to her work, leaving the alien unsettled. The station notices, by the third cycle, the station's command staff could not ignore it any longer. Reports flowed in. Docking systems were suddenly more reliable than ever. Air recycling units were running at 110% efficiency. Data relays that had been unstable for years now worked flawlessly. At first, the commanders were pleased. But then, they noticed another detail. Nearly every one of these systems was now under direct human oversight. The station director, a four-eyed scholar from the Kalari species, studied the reports with growing unease. "It is as if they have taken hold of the station's heart," he muttered, piece by piece quietly, without fanfare. His advisor, a cautious Moradin, leaned close. "Director, forgive me, but I must say this plainly. The humans are angry. If the Valorians have offended them, then we are all standing in a dangerous place." The director frowned. He did not want to believe in superstitions, but he could not deny the truth. Humans were moving with intent, and no one could yet see where that intent would lead. Elena's resolve in her private quarters. Elena sat with the torn photograph spread out on her desk. She had taped the pieces together, but the image was scarred, broken lines running through her brother's smile. She traced the cracks with her finger and whispered, "They don't understand, but they will." Her voice was steady, not trembling with grief or rage. Instead, it carried a weight, a determination that burned deeper than any outburst could. When she walked the next day through the engineering corridors, the other humans looked at her as if waiting for unspoken orders. She did not give commands. She did not need to. Her quiet resolve was enough. Every human on the station carried it now. The memory of the photograph, the insult to one of their own, the truth that something precious had been broken. And with that memory, they worked. Other species stepped back. The Valorians still dismissed the whispers, but other species acted quickly. The Tirask shifted their trade ships to distant docks, unwilling to be caught near Valorian vessels. The Moradin merchants lowered their voices when humans passed, treating them with sudden respect. Even the proud Kalari scholars chose to give the humans wider corridors, their four eyes watching carefully but silently. None of them wished to be caught in the middle. They had seen humans rise before, in other wars, on other worlds. The stories were always the same. Once humans were angered, their focus was unstoppable. And so, slowly, the other species of Korath Station stepped back and waited. The calm before Serac Vaylor still believed he had won. He strutted through the station with his attendants, laughing at the silence of the humans. To him, their quiet was proof of submission. He did not see the way every alien stared at him with pity, or how they moved aside when humans passed. He did not see the storm forming in the shadows of the station's corridors, in the quiet resolve of men and women who remembered a torn photograph. The humans did not need to raise their voices. They did not need to make threats. Their silence was louder than any shout, and somewhere, in the humming heart of Korath Station, machines clicked into perfect rhythm, guided by steady human hands. The shift was complete. Korath Station was alive with its usual noise. The hum of reactors, the flow of traders, and the voices of hundreds of different species. But beneath the surface, Things were no longer normal. Something unseen moved through the station's systems, through its machines and corridors. That something was the humans. Small failures. It began with little things. A shipment of Valorian goods arrived late. The crates were missing, though the record said they had been delivered. When Sirach Valor complained, the dockmaster shrugged. The humans manage the cargo systems. I will ask them. A day later, another failure struck. The air systems in one of the Valorian quarters began to malfunction. Not enough to harm anyone, but enough to make the air heavy and uncomfortable. Engineers came to fix it, human engineers. They repaired the system, quickly, but after they left, the Valorians noticed the controls were now coded differently. Then came the docking lanes. Sirach's cruiser was delayed 3 times in a single cycle. Each time, humans explained calmly, "We are following safety protocols." The words were polite, but the delays continued. One by one, small inconveniences grew. None of them were dangerous. None could be called sabotage. But all of them had one thing in common. The humans were at the center. Whispers in the corridors other species noticed first. In a quiet corridor, 2 Moradin workers whispered together. "Do you see what is happening?" one asked, his voice clicking. "Yes," the other answered. "The humans are tightening their grip piece by piece." In the mess hall, a group of Tarask soldiers spoke in hushed tones. "They are not loud," one said. "But look at the systems. The humans already hold the cargo, the air, the power. Even the doors. The Valorians think they are in control, but soon they will see." Even the Kalari scholars, usually calm and detached, wrote careful notes about the shift. "Human behavior under emotional strain shows patterns of quiet reorganization," one wrote. "It appears anger sharpens their focus, allowing them to seize influence without open conflict." The phrase spread again. The humans are angry. And now, it carried not only fear, but respect. Sirach's frustration, Sirach Valor, however, refused to see the truth. Each delay, each malfunction, each late shipment, it all infuriated him. But instead of seeing the pattern, he believed it was simple incompetence. "Fools," he growled to his attendants. "The humans cannot even manage simple machines. They are clumsy, slow creatures. I will report them to the station director." One attendant spoke cautiously. "Noble Sirach, forgive me, but perhaps they are doing this on purpose." Sirach turned sharply, his silver blue eyes flashing. "On purpose? Do you truly think humans have the power to resist me? I am Valorian. Their kind still crawls from their seas compared to our history." But his attendants said nothing more. They had seen the humans' silence. They had walked the corridors and felt the weight in the air. They knew what Sirach refused to admit. The human web, meanwhile, the humans worked as if nothing had changed. Elena Carter led them quietly, her presence steady, her voice calm. She did not speak of revenge. She did not give orders to attack. She simply reminded them, "Do your jobs well, take care of the systems." And they did. But with each repair, with each rerouted cable, with each rewritten line of code, the humans wove a web through the station. Cargo tracking, human-controlled. Airflow, human-optimized. Docking permissions, human-coded. Power relays, human-stabilized. They were not breaking the station. They were making it stronger. But at the same time, they were placing every important system into their own hands. The other species noticed this too. A Moradin engineer whispered, "If the humans decided to shut us all out, they could. The Valorians laugh, but they do not see. The humans already hold the station's pulse." Elena's warning. One evening, Elena was approached by a Kalari scholar in the engineering bay. The scholar bowed politely with all 4 of his eyes lowered. "Human Elena," he said softly, "I have studied your kind. I see what is happening now. Please, I ask, what is your goal? Do you wish for war?" Elena shook her head. "We do not want war. We never want war." But when someone crosses a line, we do not forget. We do not move on as if nothing happened. We remember. And we act. The scholar's throat rippled nervously. Then what will happen to the Valorians? Elena looked at him steadily. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. That depends on them. The silent pressure. The days passed, and the pressure grew. Sirach's attendants whispered about humans whenever he was not listening. Merchants avoided his ships. Soldiers gave him wide space in the corridors. Even the station director began to treat the humans with new caution, approving their requests without argument. Sirach, however, grew angrier. "I will not bow to these animals," he shouted during one private meeting. "If they think their silence frightens me, they are wrong." But the truth was different. His attendants were frightened. Not because of threats. Humans had made none. Not because of violence. None had happened. They were frightened because the humans did not need to shout or fight. They were already in control. The turning point. The final push came during a supply run. Sirach's cruiser was scheduled to receive rare minerals from the outer docks. When he arrived, the crates were missing. He demanded answers. The dockmaster checked the system logs, then looked at Sirach with uneasy eyes. The humans rerouted. "The cargo," he admitted. "It was sent to storage under their supervision. I cannot override their codes." Sirach's voice went cold. "You mean to say the humans have stolen from me?" The dockmaster lowered his head. "I mean to say, noble Sirach, that the humans now control what enters and leaves this station. Nothing moves without them." For the first time, Sirach's confidence faltered. He turned and looked across the bay. Humans worked there, calmly moving crates and checking consoles. None of them looked at him. None of them spoke to him. And yet, he felt their presence pressing down on him like the weight of a mountain. The gathering storm, in the mess halls, in the corridors, in the docking bays, the whispers grew louder. The humans are angry. They control the systems now. Do not cross them. Even those who had once mocked humanity now stepped aside when humans passed. They offered nods of respect, lowered their voices, and gave them space. It was not fear of violence. It was fear of what humans could do with patience, with focus, with silent determination. Sirach tried to rally support, but no one listened. The other species remembered old stories. Humans on battlefields who fought long after others had surrendered. Humans in disasters who rebuilt from nothing. Humans who turned grief into strength. And now, aboard Korath Station, those stories were no longer just history. They were happening again. The rising storm was no longer hidden. Everyone could feel it. Elena at the center. Through it all, Elena Carter remained calm. She still worked on her machines, still carried her torn photograph, still spoke only when needed. But every human looked to her, and every alien felt the quiet gravity she carried. She did not need to raise her voice. Her silence was enough. When one young human asked her quietly, "What comes next?" Elena answered with steady eyes. Wait, she said. "When the time is right, they will understand what it means to anger a human." And with those words, the storm drew closer. The storm that had been building on Korath Station could no longer remain unseen. The humans had not shouted, had not fought, had not made open threats, yet the entire station felt their presence pressing down like invisible weight. Every system, cargo, air docking power now passed through human hands. The other species knew it. They gave the humans space, showed them respect, and waited nervously for what would come next. Only the Valorians pretended nothing had changed. But even they could feel the tension in the air. Sirach's breaking point for days, Sirach Valor had endured what he saw as humiliation, his ship delayed, his cargo rerouted, his quarters made uncomfortable by air that was just slightly wrong. And always, the quiet presence of humans, never confronting him, never answering his insults, only working silently. The silence was worse than words. On the 10th day, Sirach could no longer contain himself. He stormed into the Valorian embassy, gathered his attendants and declared, "Enough! I will face them myself. These humans think they can toy with me. I will remind them who commands respect in this galaxy." His attendants shifted uneasily, but none dared argue. Serac's pride was too strong and his anger too sharp. The walk through the station, Serac marched through the station's wide corridors, his long robe trailing behind him, his attendants following at a careful distance. Normally, aliens would bow or lower their gaze when he passed, but today they only watched in silence. Merchants paused in their bargaining. Soldiers stopped mid-conversation. Engineers set down their tools. Everywhere Serac went, eyes followed. Him, not with admiration, but with pity. And he noticed something else. Humans were everywhere. They stood quietly in groups, repairing panels, moving crates, or simply watching. They did not block his way, but they did not move aside either. Their faces were calm, their eyes steady. Each gaze felt like a silent question. "Do you understand what you have done yet?" Serac felt heat rise in his chest. "They dare to stare at me?" he muttered. "They will regret this." But the looks continued, silent and unbroken, until Serac reached the human sector, entering the human sector. The entrance to the human sector was marked only by a set of reinforced doors. No banners, no guards, no show of power. But when the doors opened, Serac hesitated. Inside, dozens of humans moved, with perfect coordination. Some repaired machinery, others carried supplies. Their movements were smooth, efficient, and strangely unified, as if each person shared the same quiet purpose. The air felt different here, heavy, controlled, waiting. At the center stood Elena Carter. She was not tall, not armored, not commanding, in the way Serac understood command. She wore a simple technician's uniform, her hair tied back, her hands stained with oil, and yet when she lifted her eyes to him, Serac felt himself pause. Her gaze was steady, calm, but so sharp that it seemed to cut through him. The first words, "Elena Carter," Serac said, forcing his voice into smooth arrogance. "You will explain why your kind has disrupted my work, why my cargo is delayed, why my ship is denied, why my air is poisoned with discomfort." Elena studied him in silence for a long moment. Around her, the other humans stopped their work and turned their eyes toward the Valorian noble. The room grew utterly quiet. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice calm and even. "Your cargo is delayed because safety protocols were not followed. Your ship is denied because the docking lanes are full. Your air is uncomfortable because the system required repair." Serac sneered. "Do not speak to me of excuses. You have conspired against me. Admit it." Elena's expression did not change. She stepped forward slowly, holding something in her hand. It was the torn photograph, carefully pieced together with thin lines of tape. "You destroyed something that cannot be replaced," she said softly. "And now you ask why the world has shifted around you. This is the answer." The human way, Serac laughed, though the sound was brittle. "A piece of paper? You caused all this over a picture?" Elena did not raise her voice. She did not move closer. She only held the photo up so Serac could see the broken image of her brother. "To you, it is nothing. To us, it is everything. Humans carry memory in objects and symbols in the smallest things. When you tore this, you did not just insult me. You insulted my family. You insulted every human here, because we all know what it means to lose someone and to keep a piece of them with us." She lowered the photograph slowly. "Do you understand now? Our anger is not loud. It does not burn out quickly. It stays. It focuses. And it builds." Around her, the humans stood silently, their presence heavy as stone. Serac's realization for the first time, Serac felt unease stir in his chest. He looked around at the silent faces, the steady eyes, the calm strength in every human posture. They were not soldiers, yet they stood as if they were. They were not threatening him, yet he felt threatened. He realized then that he was alone. The other species on the station had stepped back, leaving him without support. His attendants shifted nervously. avoiding his gaze. The humans did not need weapons. They had already taken control. Sirach straightened, forcing himself to maintain his dignity. "What do you want from me?" he demanded. Elena's answer was simple. Respect. The choice. The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Elena continued, her voice still calm, but sharper than any blade. "We do not seek war. We do not seek revenge, but when you broke something precious, you reminded us of who we are. Humans endure. Humans remember. And when pushed, we stand together. You cannot break that." Sirach opened his mouth to argue, but the silence of the humans swallowed his words. Their eyes did not waver. Their presence pressed against him until he felt small, smaller than he had ever felt in his long life. He realized then that he had only two choices: admit fault or be crushed, not by violence, but by the unstoppable will of those standing before him. For the first time, Sirach Valor bowed his head. "Then I will offer apology." The weight lifts. The humans did not cheer. They did not smile. They only nodded, as if acknowledging that balance had been restored. Elena held the photograph close to her chest. Her eyes softened slightly, though her voice remained steady. Then the station may know peace again. Around her, the humans returned to their work. The tension in the air eased, though it did not vanish completely. The memory of what had happened would remain. Sirach left the human sector in silence, his attendants following with lowered heads. In the corridors, aliens watched him pass, their eyes filled with a new understanding. They did not see a noble. They saw a man who had faced the anger of humans and barely walked away. The lesson spreads. Word of the confrontation spread across Korath Station in hours. Merchants repeated it in the markets. Soldiers shared it in the mess halls. Scholars wrote it down in their records. The story was clear. A Valorian noble had broken something precious to a human. The humans had answered, not with violence, but with silence, with patience, with unshakable will. And in the end, the noble had bowed. The lesson was simple, and it echoed through every corner of the station. Do not mistake human patience for weakness. Do not mistake human silence for surrender. For when you anger a human, you awaken something stronger than rage. Elena's quiet reflection later. Alone in her quarters, Elena set the photograph on her desk. The cracks and lines were still there, but the image remained. She touched it gently and whispered, "It's enough." Outside her window, Korath Station turned slowly in the light of the red dwarf star. Peace had returned, for now. But the memory of the storm would remain, a quiet warning carried across the galaxy, and at the center of it all was a single truth. Humans may bend, humans may endure, but when something precious is broken, they rise together. The great station of Korath had seen many conflicts in its long history. Trade disputes, military skirmishes, even diplomatic standoffs between empires. But what had happened with the humans was different. No weapons had been drawn, no armies had marched, and no blood had been spilled. And yet everyone on the station felt they had witnessed something far greater than a simple quarrel. They had witnessed a lesson. The aftermath. The day after Sirach Valor bowed his head in the human sector, the station felt lighter. The air no longer carried the same tension. Merchants returned to their normal trading, soldiers laughed again in the mess halls, and workers filled the corridors with their daily routines. But beneath the surface, something had changed forever. The humans still worked in their engineering bays, still repaired the systems, still carried their tools through the station. But now, wherever they went, other species stepped aside respectfully. Not out of fear of violence, but out of recognition. Everyone remembered the silence, the patience, the quiet unity that had brought a proud Valorian noble to his knees. The Valorian's retreat Sirach Valor withdrew into his embassy, humiliated but alive. For days he refused to be seen in public. His attendants whispered that he spoke little, that he avoided even looking at humans in the corridors. When word reached the Valorian homeworld, the reaction was mixed. Some nobles were outraged that one of their own had bowed to a young species. Others, however, were cautious. They read the reports carefully and saw the truth that Serac had refused to see. Humans were not weak. The Valorians reduced their presence on Korath Station soon after. Their ships visited less often. Their nobles walked the corridors less proudly. Pride was still in their hearts, but now it was tempered with caution. Whispers across the galaxy stories travel fast in a galaxy filled with traders, explorers, and scholars. Within weeks, the tale of Korath Station spread far beyond its walls. On a mining colony at the edge of Moradin space, a worker told the story to his friends. They say the humans never shouted, never threatened, never raised a weapon, and still the noble bent his head. On a Tarask warship, a commander reminded his crew, "Do not underestimate humans. They are not like others. When their anger comes, it is not fire, it is stone. It does not burn out. It endures." Even in distant Kalari academies, young scholars wrote essays about the human response, describing how grief, anger, and memory combined to create an unstoppable force of focus. Across the stars, the story became a warning, a reminder, a lesson. Do not anger a human. Elena's quiet days. For Elena Carter, life returned to normal in some ways. She still worked long hours in engineering, still repaired broken systems, still guided her team, with quiet steadiness. But in other ways, nothing was the same. Aliens who once dismissed her now greeted her with respect. Merchants offered her fair deals without argument. Soldiers nodded when she passed. Even the station director, who once treated the humans as mere workers, now came personally to thank them for their efficiency. But Elena herself did not change. She still kept the torn photograph on her desk, its cracks a reminder of what had happened. Sometimes she would sit quietly and look at it, her thoughts drifting to her brother. "You would have laughed at all this," she whispered one night, smiling faintly. "But you would have understood too, because you knew what it means to be human." The other humans on Korath also felt the change. They had always known they were adaptable, capable, resourceful, but now they had seen what their unity could do. Without a single weapon, without a single fight, they had changed the balance of power on a station filled with mighty species, and they had done it together. For many of them, it became a source of quiet pride. Not arrogance, but certainty. They knew now that their strength was not in claws or armor or ancient empires. Their strength was in memory, in loyalty, in the way they stood together when one of them was wronged. It was a strength that no other species could quite understand, but all would learn to respect. The director's reflection. In his private office, the station director reviewed the reports once more. He was a Kalari, trained to analyze, to observe, to find patterns. And what he saw troubled him, though it also impressed him. He spoke aloud to his advisor. "We have witnessed something unique. Other species grow loud in anger, then quiet when the anger fades. Humans grow quiet first, and when they act, it is already too late to stop them." His advisor, a Moradin with clicking mandibles, tilted his head. "Do you fear them?" The director thought carefully. "I respect them. Fear is too simple a word. The humans are not seeking conquest. But they must never be underestimated. If anger can give them such unity, then any who provoke them invite their own defeat." The advisor nodded. "Then the lesson is clear." A message to Serac one final act remained. Elena wrote a short message and sent it through the station's communication system to Serac Valor's embassy. It contained no threats, no accusations, no demands. The message said only this: "We remember." Serac read it in silence. He crushed the datapad in his hand, but he did not reply, for he understood at last that humans did not forget. The lesson, for all time passed, and the station continued its life. New ships arrived, old ones departed, trade flowed, and peace returned. But the story of what had happened lingered. Children of many species grew up hearing it. Merchants whispered it to one another in markets. Soldiers carried it into their barracks. Scholars debated it in their halls. The story changed in small ways, as stories always do, but its heart remained the same. A human's keepsake was broken. The humans grew silent, the station shifted, and a noble bowed. It became more than a tale of one insult. It became a lesson about humanity itself. Elena's final thought. One quiet evening, Elena stood by the viewing window, watching the red dwarf star burn faintly in the distance. Behind her, the station hummed with life, held steady by systems that humans now oversaw. She thought about all that had happened, about the silence, the unity, the confrontation, and the respect that followed. And she whispered to herself, not as a threat, not as anger, but as a truth. This is what happens when you anger a human. Her words vanished into the quiet air of her quarters, but the lesson carried far beyond Korath Station, into the hearts and memories of every species who heard the story, and in that silence the galaxy understood.